How's everyone doing today? It's fun, ain't it? All these crystals, man, it's like so much energy. I always get a little like I gotta, oh, you know what? Grandmother Silver Star showed me a star symbol, how to ground yourself. Check this out. Oh yeah. That's that up and down arrow. And because she said, boy, you need some grounding. So she showed me that symbol and it instantly grounds you. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that's how they work. And she's told me in the Star Symbols book, it shows you the symbols, but it doesn't tell you that to engage it, you put a circle around it. So that was some good to need to know info. I should. That's a good idea. That feels much better. Well, my name's Michael Lee Hill, and I'm just gonna make up a bunch of stuff now. How this all started was I live very close to Lake Erie, and I'm gonna try to whip through some of this stuff because we got a lot of ground to cover, which really gets into what's in the near future for all of mankind. But this started for me back in 2005. I started seeing these huge orbs of light over Lake Erie. And I started to go down to the lake and film them. And I started to accumulate quite a library of footage. And some of it went viral. And my YouTube page right now is called Frozen Hill. And you can look it up. It's got 4.5 million views now. And that's what brought the History Channel to my door. Get that out of my pocket. And they said that they're doing a show. What's that? Frozen Hill. Yeah, all one word. And you can check out the footage, it's there, and I've been pretty much using that to make a library of everything I've been filming and whatnot. But the History Channel came knocking on my door and said, we're doing a show on Skywatchers and we would like to feature your Lake Erie UFO footage. You'll have about 5 minutes. So I said, sure. Well, what I didn't know is they had 2 weeks before they came to Cleveland to interview me, they had interviewed another contactee. His name was Terrell Copeland, and he was a Marine, and he was going to be shipped off overseas, and they did a thorough medical checkup, and in his blood work it came up that he had an unknown blood anomaly. And so what they thought was weird, the History Channel, that he had filmed the exact same orbs of light I had the same story of contact, and actually the same spiritual message given to him about be aware of what your mental energy is creating your physical experience. But he was a Marine, and they were doing a medical checkup, and they uncovered this blood anomaly, and they gave him an honorary discharge. But the History Channel thought, wouldn't it be weird if these two guys that have filmed the same objects have the same kind of story of contact? Same story of contact actually with inside government people approaching them as well, and the spiritual message. They thought, wouldn't it be weird if these two guys ended up with the same blood anomaly? So without telling me, they had me flown to Boston, and they just said, are you willing to do an upgrade to your story? I was like, sure, why not? Well, when I got there is when they told me, well, you're here, we're gonna take you to the hospital and have blood work done. Well, I'm the biggest baby when it comes to needles. I'm like, it's almost a phobia. I'm like, oh my God, I might have to act like a big boy, like it don't hurt, you know? But they do the blood work, and the last day of the production shoot, it's revealed that the Harvard professor comes up, his name was David Systrom. He's like, well, we found the exact same blood anomaly in you than we found in the other contactee. And they're like, well, your plane's waiting for you. And I was like, wait, whoa, this isn't a TV show anymore. What the hell are you talking about that I don't have normal human blood? And he's like, what do you think unknown means? Pretty much a dick about it, kind of, you know? And your plane's waiting. And he's like, if I were you, I'd contact my own private doctor, see if there's something up with that. He said if he had to guess that it would be some kind of unknown virus. that they didn't know of, that he said people think viruses are automatically negative. He said viruses actually are one of the only things that can work on the level of DNA. And what they found in my blood that was an anomaly was an increase of the enzyme creatine kinase. And creatine kinase, we'll just call it CK from this point forward. CK is released into the blood, just period. It's 25 parts per liter of blood in most of any human. And if you've ripped a muscle or had a heart attack or something, it'll jump up to about 250 to 300 parts per liter of blood. And that is to facilitate healing. That the more CK is released into the blood by the brain, it brings oxygen into the bloodstream to facilitate healing. So what they did was, when they tested my blood, it was at 2100. So the normal's 25, my levels were at 2100. He said, we don't have really any idea. There's no medical reason that your body's releasing these massive amounts of creatine kinase, but truly what it was doing is bringing a lot of chi, extra prana, electricity at a cellular level into my bloodstream. And so that was that at this point. And what you need to know is at this point in my life, I was adopted and I never knew my heritage, didn't know much about anything of that. But what had happened, that episode aired, by the way, it is available on YouTube, and it's the History Channel's UFO Hunters, Season 1, Alien Contact is the name of that episode. So you can see me getting pricked by needles, me going, anyhow. So that aired in March. In June of 2008, I was invited to go to a festival. It's called Sirius Rising. I didn't know at this point the Anunnaki are Syrians. I just thought I was going camping. I've been like, all this stuff, it's this weird stuff keeps happening. And to me, I almost feel like I'm the Forrest Gump of all this. It's like going along, just something happens, okay. When I get there, I am told to go into this gazebo structure and that there were some people in there that were waiting to meet me. When I went in, there was a male and a female, and they introduced themselves. They said, we've been known as the Anunnaki in your past. And so that's not truly what they call themselves. They said their planet to them is called the Sa'ami, and the people of the Sa'ami are the Sa'ami, and translated to Western language would be Sam, S-A-M. But we know them as the Anunnaki, and we call their planet Nibiru, which means the planet of the crossing. So at this point, there was no Ancient Aliens on TV. I didn't even know what an Anunnaki was. But they said, we want to talk to you about this blood anomaly that was revealed on the History Channel, because it's truly an indicator of our hybrid bloodline on this planet known as the Nephilim, or the Nephilim, tomato, and that these increase of creatine kinase is to be able to house the higher energetic level of an Anunnaki coming into the human form. They said for various reasons they decided to incarnate into the human form to facilitate an experiment that they put into play very long ago, which was to try to help mankind be more prepared for the end of this grand end of this cycle, being the Mayan calendar. But it wasn't 2012, it was 2016. So it's pretty recent. People don't know that. But they said that to facilitate us being more prepared, that they were going to put in an experiment that, because according to the Pleiadians, when they look forward in the future, mankind was not going to have enough time before the end of this cycle to transmute its collective shadow work, that there just wasn't enough time. They said, what we don't understand is the Earth's magnetic field acts as training wheels, as like a buffer between the thought and the manifestation of thought. The higher the magnetic field, the more of a time lag there is between the thought and the manifestation. So he said, truly, once you put out a thought, let's say you think, that Fred's an idiot, you know, and then the next day you go, you know what, Fred's not that bad. I think I mistook what happened. Well, when the time comes for it to manifest, if they don't have an energetic match, a handshake, it won't manifest. But you can imagine, as the Earth's magnetic field declines and your thoughts are manifest faster and faster if you haven't done your spiritual homework and weeded out the fear and doubt and nonsense out of your own belief system, and things are manifesting almost instantly. It's not a good combo to be at this time and not have a lot of fear still in your belief system, because it's just going to manifest instantly. So the Pleiadians were working with a previous incarnation of myself was known as Inky, and at that point they knew mankind wasn't going to evolve fast enough. Inky, with the Pleiadian elders, came up with this idea that became known as Noah's Ark, but they said, when they looked forward, they said, well, even if we save this race of yours, they're not going to evolve fast enough not to self-implode and destroy themselves, because they're going to evolve technologically way faster than they are spiritually, and it's not going to end well. So they said, well, why even do this then? So they think tanked it again, and they thought another plan was put on the table, and that was, well, what if mankind was made to experience its own mental energy in an accelerated fashion, unbiasedly? Whatever you put out, you're going to get back magnified. And if it's fear, you're going to get back that multifold. But if it's love, you'll get that back unbiasedly. Whatever you put out is what you're going to get back. So they said, you know what, that's really interesting. It's never been tried before, though. You can't just do that to an upcoming race without you willing to walk a mile in their moccasins, so to speak, and to become human and to go through the process yourself. Welcome to the machine. And so, as the story goes, Inky had went against his own kind, because the Anunnaki themselves seen the poles were going to shift, the crust, and they said, well, it must be God's will, let them perish. That didn't sit well with Inky, because he was a geneticist that actually did the genetic work to create Homo sapien. And I want to get into this right now too, because a lot of people say we were created as slave labor. And even though it's kinda, but not really, because they said truly this was a do or die situation for them, and they needed the gold to put up in their atmosphere to protect their planet. Plus they had learned to put it into, they call it monoatomic gold, where they powderize it, they snort it, it makes their DNA fire on all cylinders, gave them really long life. So as they came through our part of the solar system, by the way, the whole reality of Nibiru, their planet, has been revealed through the mass media. You can type in 2016 Planet X found, you'll find out that throughout the mass media, our scientists, NASA and everything says, we now know there is another planet in our solar system. It only comes through our part of the solar system every 3,600 years. And it goes in orbits around a dark star. So we know all stars go through life cycles, and eventually will turn into a supernova or even a black hole if it collapses on itself. But the mass is still there. So this planet is the only planet out of our solar system that orbits our dark star and goes around, and it only comes back through every 3,600 years here. Well, they noticed that there was this huge gold deposits here, so they said, well, why don't we set up mining operations? Well, what this gets into is, any of you familiar with Einstein's twins paradox? What that was he said the faster we travel through the ether, our way we perceive time actually changes. And in his mind experiment, he said, picture two twins, and one twin has a spaceship, and his earthbound twin stays on the earth. The twin that gets in his spaceship and travels even close to the speed of light for 5 years, when he returns to Earth, his brother will have died like 500 years ago. That they said, as weird as this sounds to us, that it's been proven in today's science, because like a jet airplane, if you put an atomic clock on a jet airplane and have a counterpart, you have them sync together on the ground, just at the increase of speed that the jet's flying compared to its ground-based partner, when it lands, there'll be a few milliseconds off. And they said, truly, I don't know if you guys seen Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey. They got into this idea as well, because they pointed out, well, if we go down to that planet because of the gravity and the speed, 1 week down there is going to equal 1 year up above the planet. And so in the same way, the Anunnaki that came here to mine the gold were known as the Anunnaki Heroes, because they found that when they came here, because here's what you got to keep in mind. Each twin in that twins experiment, or thought experiment, if they had wristwatches on to each one of them, it's still clicking 1 second equals 1 second. It's not until they try to come back into each other's timelines that you see a problem. And in the same way, the Anunnaki would come here to mine gold. And just the same way that the faster you travel through the ether, your perception of time changes. Well, every planet has a different orbital speed through the solar system. So time is actually experienced differently on every planet that we travel to. And we'll get into, I was brought in by the NSA remote viewers team, but they told me that there are such things as stargates, and one is in Pine Gap, Australia. Said if you walk through that stargate in Australia, instantly you would be on Mars. But on Mars, if you tried to get your Anunnaki walkie-talkie, that's fun to say, and you call back to the Earth, that the Earth would be in the 1950s right now. Your actual perception of time changes depending on what planet you're on. Well, the Anunnaki that came here were called the heroes because when they returned back to their planet, their loved ones had aged at different rates than they did. They started to look at this as a death sentence to come here and mine the gold. Well, to the king of their planet, Anu, it wasn't acceptable for their workers to go on strike. That wasn't happening. So to them, he was amassing troops to come and take out the Anunnaki picketers, going on strike. Well, it was Inky back then that said, well, listen, there's not any indigenous life form that can help us with the toil and labor, but at this time, there was a Pleiadian soul carrier that just because at that point in evolution, it was drinking from ditches and grazing on all fours like cattle, does not mean we wouldn't have become Elohim in the future. It's just everything goes through these cycles of life. But as much as you might love a chimpanzee, like try to get a chimpanzee to help you mine gold, it's not going to happen. So Inky said, what if we upgraded their awareness and their consciousness, artificially really, genetically intertwined his own genetics with this upcoming Pleiadian, which people don't know this, but Inky had a Pleiadian mother. And people don't really know, like, why was Anu partnered with a Pleiadian queen that produced Inky as the first born of their union? Well, you can imagine the Pleiadian queen was pretty interested in what was happening to her children, So what happens is Inky was the firstborn and prince, raised to take the throne, but in their succession of kingship, he severed that sooner down the timeline. Anu severed the relationship with the Pleiadian queen and took on an Anunnaki female as a wife, and they had another child, and his name was Enlil, who became known as Yahweh. And in their own succession of kingship, pureblood gets the throne over half-blood. So as the story goes, the Anunnaki, some of them didn't look favorably upon this experiment to create Homo sapien in the first place. And so the Anunnaki themselves, when the scientists found out the crust was going to slip, they said, well, it must be God's will. Let it happen. And it was Inky who said, didn't sit well with him because he looked at humankind as family. So as this mythology goes, he went to his mother's side, the elders, and said, isn't there anything that can be done? That, my race is going to let this beautiful race that has so much potential just perish and not even lift a finger. They said, well, what do you have in mind? So they went through this whole concept of a DNA library, the ARC, which became Noah's flood myth and all that. They said, well, using our foresight of what we'd call remote viewing, but being able to see the future, mankind, this was a different time where we had a definite ending to this grand cycle of times, Kali Yuga, hundreds of thousands of years time cycle, was going to end in 2016. Most people think it's 2012, but it wasn't. It's December 21st, 2016. And the answer was, in the Sumerian word of where mankind was brought on this planet was Eden. That sounds pretty familiar. And they said that truly, instead of being thought of as slave labor, we were more like pampered pets. Our lives were very Edenic, and everything was taken care of for us. There was no starvation, there was no homeless, and we lived in peace and harmony with the Anunnaki. And if we wanted to meet one of them, we went to a pyramid, and there was the 15-foot guy on his throne and the little us going up to learn from them. It wasn't a question. But the problem was, what the Pleiadians seen was, because of being pampered pets, we weren't evolving. We were stagnant because everything was taken care of for us. So they said, why are we going to go through this process of saving mankind if they're not going to evolve fast enough? Because like we're saying, with the Earth's magnetic field creating a buffer, or like training wheels, at this time, if you haven't weeded out your fear and doubt out of your own psychic belief system, and you're in a time where your thoughts manifest instantly, it's not a good combo. So they said, well, why even save them if they're going to self-implode anyhow? So then they think tanked it again, and they said, what if we did an experiment and we made mankind experience its own mental energy in an accelerated fashion back to them, and unbiasedly, whatever you put out, you get back multifold. If it's fear, like in the Star Symbols book, it says because with this experiment, you can imagine you would want some way to gauge whether your experiment is working or not. That became known as the Council of 12, or it's the same thing. Some people will tell you 7 Lords of Light, 7 Lords of Darkness, which is brought up in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And the 7th tablet is actually called the seven Lords. And that the Ancient Aliens has an episode called The Mysterious Nine. And I'm seeing that it's the same council, but why is they calling that 9? And from what I've understood, it's 7. And then halfway through the show, they're like, in the Council of 9, there's 7 seen and 2 unseen. I'm like, it's the same thing. But I've met Yahweh himself, and he said, Michael, I work with the 7 Lords of Light and the 7 Lords of Darkness, but I'm the only one who sits directly in between both councils, and I'm the only one who holds a seat on both light and dark. That leaves 6 members on each side, besides Yahweh in the middle. That's a council of 12, plus him being the 13th. And this is the council that oversees human evolution to see if we're learning what we need to learn. So they separate into 2 camps. 7 Lords of Darkness will see if you will give your I am, your sovereignty, your energy away to an illusionary outside source. And they'll test you to see if you do. They'll dangle carrots in front of you to see if you take the bait. And if you do, you're taking down a corridor of darkness. And it progressively gets worse and worse and worse until I asked them, I said, has anyone ever turned around that went down that dark path? He said, no one ever. That's interesting. But there's also the flip side of it, which to me is almost a little bit more difficult. And the 7 Lords of Light test a human initiate, and they said, upon everyone's death, you'll go before this council, and your soul will be weighed. And you'll see, the light will test you to see what kind of love and compassion you bring to any suffering that comes your way. It's the total flip side of the dark. And truly, this is interesting. I don't know if you know Graham Hancock, but he showed this mural, and he said it was on an ancient temple, and it actually tells you the Anunnaki spirituality. He said it was the myth of the churning of the Milky Ocean. And he said the most important thing in this myth was this Milky Ocean in between them, because in their mindset, that Milky Ocean contained the multiverse, and all the planets and all the galaxies and everything rested in this Milky Ocean. And there's two teams of churners, a team of light and a team of darkness, but they weren't at war with one another. What really needed to be understood is they were working in cooperation to churn the evolution of mankind into the higher realms. So the Anunnaki split for this experiment into two different teams. One would make sure no one got through, that would give their energy away to illusionary outside sources. But if you come before a multidimensional being whose spiritual role it is to make you experience your own darkness, you're gonna go demon, you know? They're not demon, they're just, you're being made to experience your own dark baggage in hopes, because they understand thoughts have an electromagnetic reality. There's energy. And even with today's science, energy can't be created or destroyed. It needs to be transmuted into, could be a lower octave, we're shooting for higher, right? So how do you transmute a lower vibrational frequency thought form into its higher vibrational octave of love? You live it. It comes up into our own personal reality for us to choose. If you don't transmute it, it'll just keep happening. And you go, why does this same crap keep happening to me over and over? It's different people, but it's the same experience. It's because those energies haven't been transmuted. So Team Dark, I call them Team Bad Cop, their spiritual role is to make you, if you need a dark lesson, they'll let you experience your own dark energy up front, personal, close, in hopes that you'll change it. When it comes up, you'll choose love. And at that point, you'll see it stops happening in your life. That energy is transmuted. And they said truly, like what they said with Jesus, you know, transmuting sin for all of us. What I think is not been told is we all do it. Every single time we transmute a certain energy that gets put into the Akashic, our collective mass consciousness. And the next time someone comes across an experiment or an experience like that has that kind of energy stamp, they'll have a different thought form. It's truly how you chose to transmute it. Doesn't mean they'll accept it, but it will be there. It'll be in their own voice. Say, hey, you couldn't maybe look at it this way, but it might not be accepted, but it's there, and we all do it. So Team Bad Cop is going to look out there over the mass consciousness. Someone's vibrating fear, they'll make sure that they get a chance to experience that thought form. Team Light is coming in and guiding us into higher realms of sacred geometry, physics of light and sound, and how it creates physical reality, music, things that uplift the human psyche. So, but when I met the Anunnaki, because what happened was, after I started filming them over Lake Erie, I was brought to this festival in New York called Sirius Rising. Like I said, I didn't even know the Anunnaki were Syrians at that point. I thought I was going camping. And there was some people in this structure, and I was introduced to them, and they told me, we've been known in your past as the Anunnaki. And what they said was, this whole experiment to accelerate human conscious evolution, how can I explain this? They said that their whole way that their succession of kingship and how they relate to mankind is based on a processional cycle. And at that time, I didn't know what the processional cycle even was. But they said that that's why there's so much prophecy of leaving the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. They said the very second that we entered the age of Aquarius, this experiment of light and dark acceleration was finished. We'd either have learned our lesson and got the approval, or we would have got a fail, and it would have been purification by fire. And they said, luckily enough, it looks ugly to us, but we're evolving at a rate that's unheard of. The Anunnaki that met me in 2008, he said, we wouldn't understand it because we're in it, just like those two twins in the twins paradox. Their wristwatches are still clicking 1 second equals 1 second. But he said they experience time differently than we do. And the only way we'd be able to understand it if we were doing an experiment to try to raise the awareness level or consciousness of some type of animal that was right on the verge of self-awareness, like say a chimpanzee. And he said, imagine that we were doing an experiment trying to raise the intelligence and self-awareness, consciousness level of a chimpanzee, and then we had a 2-week vacation coming up, and we went on our vacation, and when we came back, they'd created football and religion and government and, you know, cities, and to them even, they're going, whoa, what the hell happened? You know, that something happened with this experiment that is creating something new in the multiverse, which is something that's gaining a lot of attention, and that is mankind is evolving at a rate that is unheard of even in higher realms. They said that, you know, we don't understand it because we're in it, but in 1950s, we wouldn't allow a black person to sit on, you know, the front of a bus or drink out of the same water fountain. We're killing dolphins left and right, even though we got a long way to go. But at least people are becoming more conscious of our effect on the environment and, you know, on that kind of thing. He said this kind of growth that we've seen in just 50, 60 years would take, without this acceleration software, it would have taken us lifetime after lifetime after lifetime to get the same amount of growth. They said truly, this brings the attention because we're all one, right? So anything that, they said really truly, I want to say this is, they told me that is the whole purpose of this system of duality. It's a state of evolution where we become an individual. And the gift is, you get to take you with you after this cycle. And you get to unfold up into source with your likes and your dislikes and how you perceive reality. And you take it with you now. There's no more, you know, yes. So that's quite a gift, you know. And so what I want to tell you is what I learned from them as well about the mass consciousness is they said, what we don't understand is every first thought that we receive in our head is from the mass consciousness. And right now, unfortunately, the mass consciousness is still filled with a lot of fear and doubt and nonsense. And that once the thought form comes in, and it is from the mass consciousness, if you accept it, you own it, and you will manifest it. But said truly, once I started to understand thoughts created reality, I started to realize, well, why is my own internal dialogue still negative? You know, why? Like, to me, I'm like, I couldn't stop it. I was like, this thought would, oh, I'm getting screwed again. Oh, this person's betraying me again. I'm thinking, I went to the big woman upstairs, I call her. I'm like, what? I need an answer. You know, and what I got was a recording, like almost like a download of a giant record player. Remember the old style with the big horn, the needle that went down? And it said it's just a recording. And in that download of information, I got it, like out of the infinite amount of parallel realities from light to dark, that's showing me what I had a fear stamp on. There could be a lot of worse things but in my mind, that's not possible. But this has happened to me before, and that's where you have a fear stamp on. So I got to the point where with that lesson to me of it's just a recording, I said, thank you for showing me my lowest common denominator. Now what else is available? The minute you can say now what else is available, you've broken that spell to the mass consciousness, because most people will not look for a different thought form. They'll think that that's my thought, they'll own it. But by the way, not every thought form is going to be negative. If it's a beautiful thought form from the mass consciousness, by all means own it. Take it and run with it. But if it's something fear-based, like Bruce Lee said, he came across the same point in his evolution, and when he would have a feeling of a thought form of fear or doubt, he'd write it down on paper and burn it, give it back to the universe. Now what else is available? So to me, it's very important that when our first thought forms come into our heads, if it's negative, if it's telling you you're being betrayed or fear, just train yourself to go, thank you, what else is available? If I can leave you with anything that's created some miracles in my own life of transmuting some of the negative things. It says truly, it's taking the reins and becoming a co-creator, because what I was taught is that if you only manifest from the mass consciousness, you're not affecting the mass consciousness. It just makes sense that most people's mental energy does not affect the mass consciousness at all. It's only until you become a co-creator and start to step outside of that labyrinth, you know, and form a new way out of that. And, you know, I've heard it called, the state of consciousness is called the sovereign integral. Sovereign meaning you've claimed your I am and stepped into your sovereignty, yet you're still connected to the whole. You know, sovereign integral is the next step of human evolution that we're truly yearning for. So what I can tell you is with all this is, once I met the Anunnaki, this is kind of what was communicated to me. But what I want to get into now, like fast forwarding, is the Nephilim. They're human hybrid bloodline on this planet. Some people might know Edgar Cayce did a lot of prophecy on Atlantis, and that the Hall of Records being under the Sphinx's paw and a few other places on the planet, which we're about to reveal. The true Hall of Records is going to be revealed, and I'll tell you about that. But people don't know, he also said what happened to the Atlanteans, which, by the way, he called them the Poseidians. Poseidon is Enki. It's the water bearer. You know, he's always depicted as, or Neptune, or Maitreya. Yes?
Well, the Enki's original name Ea,
yes.
which means Lord of the Water.
Yes. Good. Yeah, Enki is actually a title, it's not a name. And Enlil is a title, not a name. En means Lord, Kai means earth. So it's a title, kind of like the Dalai Lama isn't a name, it's a title. So yes, his name was Ea. But you know, this is interesting, is the Native American Indians, which we're going to get into. I've been brought into the elders, and they told me Ea's name prior to Samaria was Archangel Michael. So I was like, wow, okay, I never knew that. But it's interesting because it said Archangel Michael and Archangel Lucifer are one and the same, which I thought that was interesting as well.
Also, my understanding is that Lucifer is a made-up name because they don't want to say the name of the real entity, otherwise you might draw him near you.
I personally, I think that, to me, the Vatican has taken a lot of the good guys. I don't know if you know this, but the Pope just came forward and said, you know, sorry about that 2,000 years of saying Mary Magdalene is a hooker and a prostitute. We just found out she's the apostle of apostles, and, you know, so, yes. So to me, they took a lot of the good guys and flipped them bad, and to me, Lucifer is nowhere in the Bible. It says he's a light bearer, and oh, I didn't know that.
It's like Helios, that's what they call it, Hell. Yeah. I don't know
Interesting.
how to spell it, but I follow somebody and she taught me that. And other stuff that she taught me about, I didn't learn it on my own, so I kind of vibrate with her. And she said his name is Helios.
I'm going to share something because this is, I guess, the time to share it, and I've begun sharing it. But when I met the Anunnaki, they told me, you in your past was known as Ea, the water bearer. And I went, what the hell does that mean? I didn't know what an Anunnaki was at that point, so that surely didn't make any sense to me. So in early 2009, I was having telepathic communication with them after meeting them in the flesh, so to speak. And I asked them, I said, listen, I'm a student of the crop circle phenomenon. If you are who you say you are, encode the name Ea Enki into a crop circle. That'll be my sign, confirmation that you are who you say you are, and I am who you say I am. And then my next thought was, what a silly request. Can you imagine like a big crop circle and written in cursive as Enki? It's like, what the hell is that ever going to prove? Then my next thought was like, well, if you are who you say you are, you'll figure out a cool way to do it. And then I got really cocky. I was like, while you're at it, encode it with something only I would be able to decode. And I just let it go. And that was in early 2009. 2011, a crop circle shows up in Italy. First of all, it's based on a 7-pointed star, which is important. And at the end of each star, if you guys come over to my table over there, I have the crop circle made into a crystal disc. at the end of the 7-pointed star was lines like dot dot empty, dot dot empty. And what it was ASCII binary code around the 7-pointed star. And when you decoded the ASCII binary code, it said Ea space Inky. So they did encode the name Ea Inky exactly how I asked them. But what was really surprising to me is I make these crystal disc creations, and I had made one out of that crop circle because it's a very special crop circle to me because of the connection of me asking them for this confirmation. So I had created it, and it's based off a 7-pointed star. Well, I was also being guided into what I would call the most cosmic harmonious frequencies. And that is, if you take the idea that everything in our reality is created from sacred geometry, whether it's an atom to a galaxy, well, then you find out that frequency creates geometry. So it's probably pretty important to figure out what frequencies create perfect geometry. And what it is 432 is the magic number. And the reason this is, let me tell you this. The 7-pointed star is created through cymatics. Cymatics is a way of making the invisible visible. It's a scientific device. It started off with a big metal plate with sand on it, and then you take a bow and it was tuned, and and then you watch the sand dance, and then geometry would form, and it wasn't random. Every time you hit specific frequencies, specific geometry would form. Well, it's evolved to the point now where they have a huge vat of water, and they have a tripod that it sits in, and then they can pump frequency through it, and they got a real high-tech camera that's recording what's happening on the surface of the water and what geometry is forming. Well, 432 they've been trying to guide us into this most cosmic harmonious frequency that aligns us with cosmic energy. It's like Tesla talked about. And the reason is, 1 year prior to the Inky crop circle, in the exact same town and the same field in Italy, showed up a crop circle, and in ASCII binary code was encoded E equals MC squared. Well, science tells us now everything is both particle and wave simultaneously. Well, if you think about it, that's only the particle part of the equation. M is mass, E is energy, C is the speed of light squared. So where's the frequency component? And it's hidden. What you find out is 432 squared is the speed of light within 1% accuracy. So the only frequencies that are truly components of light are 432 base frequencies, then becomes squared times mass equals energy when you run it backwards. So what I can tell you is the 432 frequency, say in the middle of your piano, you got it tuned properly to that middle note being A equals 432. By the way, right now our musical standard is 440 hertz. And man, this goes all over the place. But I met a Pleiadian ambassador, and he said, Michael, you know how the ancients gave us this idea of multiplying and dividing whole units by 12, whether it's 12 apostles, 12 hours in a day, 12 inches in a foot, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12. He said, let's see what happens when you take 440 and divide it by 12. What you get is 36.66666666. It goes out to like, so interesting, right? He goes, look at that. He said it's pretending to be sacred geometry while still being an imposter. If you take, he said, now let's take 432 and divide it by 12. What you get is a perfect 36. And all 432 base numbers they resolve the 9. 4 plus 3 plus 2 is 9. It's really easy. Like I said, if you got this middle note on your piano tuned properly, there's still a lower A note, 1 octave lower. All you do is divide by 2. That's 216. Then to get the lower octave of that, you divide by 2. It's 108. 108 is interesting because Tibetans.
I believe the 440 was put into force by Goebbels.
Yeah, Nazi. Yes, 1940s. They knew exactly what they're doing. It's not. It's probably the most disharmonious frequency that we could choose.
Rock band's tuned down.
Yeah. We're gonna just grassroots. There is a new movement of retuning to 432 because as a musician, once you tune to 432, it resonates so much more. You feel it. You will not want to go back to 440. But what's interesting with this is when you get down to 27 hertz, which is again a 9. The reason I'm telling you this is when you take 432 divided by 12, you get a 36. 3 and 6 is 9. Tesla said once we understood the magnificence of the 3, the 6, and the 9, we'd unlock keys to the universe. Well, 4 octaves below 27 hertz, through a cymatic scientific device, creates a perfect 7-pointed star. It just so happens, what we'll find out is what I was talking about, Edgar Casey. He said what happened to the Atlanteans. He said they became known as what is the Native American mound builders and intertwined into the Iroquois first, and then all the, the Sioux, the Cherokee. Cherokee and Iroquois are the same blood. But what's interesting with this is when you look, a lot of people might know in ancient Sumer, that humanity came right out of the gate, full functioning culture, math, law, ways of culture. Look at how many seconds is in 12 hours. It's 43,200, 432. When you look at the actual earth mounds, like Newark, Cahokia, Serpent Mound, the ones that have squares and circles, they're encoding 432 base frequency mathematics into the actual dimensions and layouts. So what I'm saying is, you'll see one wall of an earth mound that is 1,080 feet long. Another wall will be 2,160 feet long. That's 108 and 216. They're octaves of 432. It's like they've been trying to guide us into what are these most cosmic harmonious frequencies for a very long time. Well, what this gets into is the revealing of, biblically, they were known as the lost tribe from Israel. And what I can tell you is in 1998, a brand new DNA haplogroup was found, and it's called haplogroup X2A. And that's not that long ago, And what they found was it threw the history books upside down, because we've been told everyone that came to the United States came through this Asian migration route. Haplogroup X2A only exists, right now, presently, it's 3% of the Native American Indians still to this day. Said it could be much higher, because not a lot of Native American Indians have had their blood work done, but they know of at least 3%. But going back in time, some of these tall skeletal remains that have been removed out of these earth mounds are haplogroup X2A. But these were giants. So right here is a really interesting talking point to me. There's no doubt that a few generations ago, I'm haplogroup X2A, by the way, we were giants. Now we're not. Something's happened. It could explain even abductions, and I don't think the genetic work has truly ended, so we could fit in better and not stick out like a sore thumb. But when you trace this bloodline back in time, it's the hills of Galilee, Israel. It is the bloodline that defected with the Templars and brought it's the Holy Grail, Sangreal bloodline, and they became known as what is the Mound Builders, and now they're intertwined into the Native American Indians. But what's funny is now I've been brought in by the elders, like Chief Golden White Eagle, and he does these Star Knowledge conferences, which is all the elders and grandmothers from all these different tribes, like the Aztec, the Zuni, the Choctaw. They're all there, and they've got permission now to reveal their contact with star beings over thousands of years. So what I'm telling you now, I find it funny because they know. One of the grandmothers contacted me, and she said, we're so happy that you're revealing the truth about the mound builders, because in 5,000 years of written history and 10,000 years of oral history, we know the mound builders are the remnants of the Atlanteans. And they also know that they're Anunnaki. It's just within their culture they know, which I find that very fascinating. But how this all revolves around what's going to happen in the very near future is I live in a place called East Lake, Ohio, and I found out my mother worked for the recreation department for 20 some years, and I remember growing up she would say, there used to be an Indian mound up there, and I went, really? So I went and looked into it. Sure enough, this site had walls that were 660 feet long, and a big triangle, 660 foot long walls with a pyramid in the middle of it, and they'd mowed it down. There's a school that sits there now. But I started to realize the oldest name in our city is called Lost Nation. It's like ding, ding, ding. It's like if someone was trying to, you know, it's like I grew up there and all of a sudden it's like, oh, hello. When you get to the end of Lost Nation Road, it then ends at Lake Erie. Because what happened was when the bloodline came up into the bottom of the North American continent for the first time, they met the Mayans first, showed them Mayan calendar, pyramid building, but this darkness experiment of accelerating light and dark was well underway. So all of a sudden, when darkness set in and the Mayans are like, well, we think we need to start sacrificing and heads, the mound builders are like, let's keep on going north. You know, I don't think they're really getting it. So they went up and became known as what the mound builders, but they went until they dead-ended on Lake Erie. And this area they named Tioga, which is an Iroquois word for place of entry, peaceful valley. And so when you get to the end of Lost Nation, if you take a left within a mile, you're at the first site of the mound builders. But if you take a right, someone in the street names left the treasure map. And the first word is Tioga. The next word is Cherokee. The next street name is Iroquois. The next is Seneca, Seminole. And then Mohawk, and then Thunderbird. Which, interesting, huh? So I started to realize, as someone was trying to erase this information from our history, it had to be a Templar that was making sure it was actually in our street names. So I want to fast forward to a couple months ago. I got a call from a gentleman from the Smithsonian, and he said, do you know that there's still an intact mound in your city? No. You know, I was raised there. No one in our city knows that it's there. And sure enough, it's kind of hidden in plain sight. If you go to chagrinriverpark.com, it's a lake metro park. It says right there, this was the site of the Whittlesley Indian culture. We'll get into that. I'm going to hit this real quick. Hopewell was the name of a farmer who had mounds on his land, and they became known as the Hopewell Indians. Nothing to do with what the true culture is. In this part of Ohio, they were called Whittlesley. Whittlesley was the name of the Army surveyor who surveyed the site in the late 1800s. Again, nothing to do with the culture. So I can tell you the Cleveland Natural History Museum is in the process of a multi-million-dollar renovation to reveal and rename, and I'm involved with them and the Historical Society. I'm telling them it should be Tioga. That's what they named it. So I think it should be named the Tioga tribe. But so he says, yeah.
Hopewell was a Confederate soldier.
Was it? He was physically a farmer, whoever it was as well, because his mounds were on his site, and then somehow. But the mound, you've been there. I took you guys there. He contacts me and says there's still intact earth mound there, and he showed me where to go and find it. Sure enough, I went there, and this mound is so big, it's kind of like a ziggurat, you know, like one of the kind of pyramid that comes up and it's big level. It takes up 1.1 mile to walk around it, which is fascinating. And it's got artifacts that were already removed out of the Smithsonian dig that is in the Willoughby Indian Museum that ties it to ancient Egypt, to Sumer, specifically Inky. It's the first depiction of the morning star, which is really prevalent through the Native American Indian culture. Matter of fact, I'm sitting next to Chief Colin White Eagle, and his brother on his headdress has, I didn't even know what it was at this time. I just knew it was an East Lake. Like, Chief, what is that on his headdress? He's like, oh, that's the morning star. Remember, we're talking about Lucifer too, morning star. Interesting, the whole correlation of what's coming about. But what I can tell you is Thomas Johnson, the wife of Terry Rivera, she's the Serpent Clan grandmother for the Native American Indians. He's been on the History Channel as well, and he's working with a team that has brand new technology, ground penetrating radar, and we're bringing that team to scan this new unknown Hall of Records mound site to see what's there. But what I can tell you is in 2024, the next total eclipse, you know how there's an X? That next one comes right over the mound in East Lake, Ohio. And all the elders, just recently, all of the elders through the Star Knowledge family, we had 1,000 people at Serpent Mound for the eclipse. And if you go to NPR, they were there, and we ended up on the NPR news site for the eclipse. Here here I am rubbing the microphone again. Doesn't that sound good? Can I do this? Sorry. 5 minutes. So here's what's happening. Man, I'm just gonna lay down some stuff. I met who in the Native American Indian culture was known as White Buffalo Calf Woman. She's Pleiadian, and she's here in physical incarnation. And we just walked the site, and we were told that it took both of us, being twin souls, to walk that site to unlock the Hall of Records. That's been done. Our marriage will be on that mound in 2024, and that it truly will be a new beginning for mankind, of the unlocking of mankind's hidden history and who we are as a species. Because to me, I was like, whoever gave the Vatican the authority to hide who we are as a species? I didn't give them that permission. So to me, let's just open up the Hall of Records. Let's open up the Vatican archives, let the pieces fall where they may. And that is truly the apocalypse. The apocalypse means the revealing of what was once hidden. So I'm proud to be a bringer of the apocalypse, and I'll end it there.